What is up, guys? This is my second video for Allied leadership, and this is going to be covering the life of Winston Churchill. It's at war, 1874, 1945. It's by Carl Dest. He also wrote Patton, A Genius for War, so he's obviously got a great resume as far as military and biography writing. It's obviously quite the doorstop. Words are hard. It's exactly 700 pages before the notes, so it's definitely heavy reading, but it is well worth it. I have to say, before I keep going, hopefully you've already watched the Commander-in-Chief video that I just made. They really go really well together because they both talk so much about the figures in between them, and I think that you get a really complete look on the Western Allied forces that you wouldn't get if you just read one or the other. Obviously, neither of these covers Stalin and him, but he sucks, so who cares? Only partly kidding, but really, if you want to sort of understand the U.S.-UK relations within the time period, I really think these two books are critical, and I definitely would say that you should read both of them, not just one or the other, because they really fill in gaps for each other really well. That being said, I'll just dive right into it, start with the argument, and then just talk a little bit more about structure, narrative, and just the strengths and weaknesses. So, Winston S. Churchill was a rare breed of man, born for war, born to engage in the mighty calamities of his time. In the same line as sort of Alexander the Great and Napoleon, from a young age, the naturally abrasive and rebellious nature of Churchill set him at odds with his father and professors. This chasm developed his unorthodox yet brilliant style of approaching conflict. His perpetual need for power and influence pushed him to audacious places through the conflicts preceding World War I and World War II, but his desire to help people remained undiminished. In short, Winston Churchill was a magnetic man with monumental strength to mirror his monumental weaknesses. Despite those weaknesses, and despite eventually becoming the junior partner in the alliance, there is no doubt that Churchill's defiance, leadership, and love of leadership is what allowed Britain to survive the world's deadliest war ever, and I thought Dest was thoroughly persuasive on the account. Before I keep reading, I just want to say it's a great book, first of all, but and I don't even know how much I'll need to look at this one because I'm really passionate about it. I like the FDR book. This one really stood apart for me as maybe my favorite book that I've read for this class, and it was just so refreshing how it was written. It really covers a lot of his life. It starts out when he's very young, actually in his infancy. It talks about him the day he's born, really up to the end of his life, but it's all focused about what would make him the man he was throughout World War II. So it talks about the Boer War, his time in India, South Africa, and the Americas even, which I didn't know about. Really goes deep into his schooling and sort of those formative years in which he sort of received his formal education and sort of military theory, which is part of why he was so brilliant. So really, there's nothing that can be classified in any way other than a biography. It focuses around his life at war, but it is a biography of Winston Churchill, and does a great job of doing so. It's semi-chronological, semi-topical. The first part, pretty much up until World War II, is pretty much exclusively chronological. It goes step by step. Keeps circling back to how this relates to him at war, but at the same time doesn't break narrative. Once you get to the war, it goes sort of into different areas of the war because obviously so much was going on during the conflict all the time, and it would be sort of difficult to maintain a narrative while going step by step through that. So that's the sort of hybrid format that the author used here, which I thought worked well. Sources, he uses a ton of memoirs, whether that be Winston Churchill's estranged father, and they talk about a lot about their relationship with his mother, siblings, his own, his various colleagues. He uses a lot diaries and memoirs to sort of convey the more private thoughts, feelings, and communications between the political and military personnel during the war. A lot in the same way that the FDR book did, just because that's a lot of, when you're trying to tell a story of people, not just events, that's where you get to see more of who they truly were, is in those interpersonal communications. Additionally, biographies such as the British one of Churchill, that the official government of the United Kingdom, the Crown, that they have published, is utilized a lot, and communication remained a large part of this book's stash of evidence. With Churchill and Clementine, his wife's letters, they serve as an excellent example. They really never saw each other that much. Like they were, it seems like from the communication, happy. They spent decades married together, but at the same time, he was always at war or wanting to go to war in an office. So there's just countless letters that they wrote to each other, which he uses excellently in this piece to sort of, again, expound upon, reveal their relationship, as well as connect the missing pieces and point all the while back to his immense strengths and immense weaknesses as a wartime leader. He had a lot of both. When available, the maps do provide nice geographical context, but there's not very many of them. I thought his use of Churchill's background, growing up with a estranged father, shadow of his brother, and then just the fire that Churchill always carried into him. I think they utilized that storytelling in the beginning, really carried over well into explaining some of his motivations and methodologies during the conflicts when he was a leader. Explained a lot as to why he was so unwilling to admit wrongness, so brash, and it was really hard for him to accept the fact that he was no longer the senior partner in the U.S.-UK relationships when they started doing joint commands, because he just wanted to be the hero, and that's who he saw himself as. He never saw himself as anything but a winner. He really is of a rare breed. But again, in that storytelling, you see a lot of his greatness, and I thought Death did a great job in exposing that. I didn't see a ton of weaknesses in this book. I think one of them would be perhaps, given its length, Death's propensity to repeat himself, especially concerning Churchill's obstinacy. Like, he uses an excessive amount of examples to prove that Churchill is stubborn, frankly. And while it was sometimes amusing, like, you definitely got to the point when, like, he's refusing to listen to his superior or inferior, his colleague, for the 17th time, and you're like, okay, cool, I get it. He has daddy issues, and he's a little stubborn. Can we move on? But at the same time, it's a big part of the book, and I understand sort of the repetitive nature, but it did felt like you could have glossed over it, because it sort of had been discussed ad nauseum. This, and then I thought the need for a more extensive use of maps and graphs to sort of explain, I guess would be the non-smart, intelligent word, what was going on, because there's so much movement and strategy, especially in the latter half of the book, and then some in the Bure portions of the war, before World War I, that it would have been really nice to have a more visual aspect. But other than that, this one I really feel strongly about. I loved it. I would read it again. I encourage you all to, in conjunction with the FDR one, even though it wasn't as engaging for me. They're both great, and I think they really fill in the story well on both sides reading. They're great examples of good comprehensive history on American leadership and English leadership during the war, and I think it gives a really good picture. So yeah, in sum, I thought it was a great book, and it's long but worth it. Thanks.